It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened, 2:47 p.m. to be exact. I remember the time because it was the moment everything in my life quietly shifted. Not with a bang, not with a confrontation, but with the silent arrival of an email in my inbox. The subject line was vague. Quick notes from yesterday. It came from my boss, Edward Langston, Senior VP, the man whose recommendation had secured me 2 promotions in 5 years. The man I'd had over for dinner. The man who'd smiled at my wife across our table and asked for her wine recommendation. If you've ever been betrayed and chose power over pettiness, like, subscribe, and stay for more stories where silence rewrites everything. The email wasn't meant for me. That was clear immediately. I wasn't part of the conversation. It had been forwarded in error. But the thread below? It didn't just include meeting notes or internal planning. It included her name, her personal email address, and the kind of language you can't explain away as professional. Still thinking about you in that red dress. Might have to invent another late strategy session. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't spike. What I felt was clarity, cold, heavy, and settling into place like a final puzzle piece. It explained so much. The long work nights, her sudden interest in quarterly earnings, the private text she used to smirk at before tucking her phone away. And it came not from suspicion, but from his mistake. I didn't respond. I didn't storm out of the office or call her phone. I sat there, in that padded chair, surrounded by the sterile white walls of a corporate office, while the sound of fluorescent lights hummed overhead. And I made a decision, not just about them, but about myself. I wouldn't react. I would restructure. And by the time this merger went through, they wouldn't just lose each other. They'd lose everything. I spent that evening alone in my home office, the overhead light low, my laptop open, and the email printed neatly in my hand. I didn't read it again. Once was enough. The words were burned into me, not because they were poetic, but because they were definitive. That line about the red dress. It was the same one she'd worn to our anniversary dinner just 3 weeks prior. She'd asked if it still made her look like trouble. I told her it did. I just didn't realize who she was making trouble for. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was broken, but because I was calculating. My mind didn't run in loops of heartbreak or rage. It moved like a ledger, like a project plan. I had 2 goals: expose them and come out clean. Edward, my boss, was on the executive steering committee for the upcoming merger with a European firm. This was the kind of deal that reshaped org charts and decided careers. He was positioning himself to be the face of the post-merger strategy. What he didn't know was that I had access to the entire internal collaboration drive, one of the few perks of leading the back-end operations group. Every memo, every travel itinerary, every personal hotel upgrade listed under non-billable expense. All logged, all time-stamped. I started collecting emails, receipts, Slack messages where he'd scheduled late meetings with no calendar invites. A photo my wife had posted to her private story, her hand on a wine glass with a nameplate in the background that read Langston. She wasn't subtle, but she thought she was protected. They both did, so I played along. At work, I praised his leadership. I smiled in team meetings. At home, I let her plan our weekends, let her think the guilt would never surface. I kissed her cheek. Let her believe I was tired, distracted. Let her ignore the tension. The trick wasn't to act like nothing was wrong. It was to act like I still had something to lose. Because by the time the boardroom lights came on, they'd both realize I'd already left them behind. The merger was scheduled for mid-March, inside the firm's downtown headquarters. Glass walls, black marble, the kind of place that echoed with silent deals and strategic backstabbing. I'd never been nervous in a meeting before, but this time I wasn't presenting numbers. I was presenting truth. And I'd prepared for this moment like it was war, because in many ways, it was. 3 weeks before the final board vote, I submitted a confidential ethics report, anonymous at first, outlining a conflict of interest involving Edward Langston and a member of his personal circle. I attached time-stamped documentation of inappropriate expenses, private travel, overlapping company retreats, and digital communications that violated multiple clauses in our corporate code. But I didn't stop there. I also scheduled a private meeting with one of the European firm's advisors. No anger, just facts. I handed over the same file. No speculation, just proof. I told him I believed in the merger and wanted it to go through, but warned that proceeding with Langston as a public face would invite scrutiny neither firm could afford. He read the file in silence. When he looked up, he said one word: understood. The next week, Edward began to unravel. First came the formal HR inquiry. Then the canceled press interview. He was still smiling in meetings, but it was thinner, like the corners of his mouth couldn't quite keep up with the weight of his collapsing credibility. He asked me to lunch. I declined. He sent a vague calendar invite titled Realignment Check-In. I didn't respond, because I didn't need a confrontation. I'd already done the realigning. At home, my wife began to notice. She asked if work was okay. I told her the merger was going well. I told her I might be getting a new role soon. She smiled and kissed me like nothing had changed. But the truth was, she didn't know the nameplate on the corner office was about to change. And this time, it wouldn't be Langston's. The shareholders' meeting was held in a private conference room. Executive teams present. Memos reviewed. Votes cast. And then, the unexpected. Edward Langston was removed from the transition team. Publicly, silently, and permanently. No one asked questions in the room, but the eyes around the table said everything. A few glanced at me. One even nodded. I said nothing. Just clicked my pen and moved to the next agenda item. Because power isn't about noise. It's about timing. And in that room, I wasn't just an analyst. I was the man who made the floor shift beneath them. When Edward resigned, for personal reasons, no one needed a memo to read between the lines. His departure was swift, absent of celebration or send-off. The kind of exit that leaves a stain, unspoken but understood. He tried to spin it, said he was exploring new opportunities and focusing on family. But everyone at the top knew. His leverage had collapsed under the weight of his decisions. And so had hers. My wife received the fallout in echoes, not headlines. First, Edward stopped replying to her texts. Then the dinners became excuses. She asked me one evening, casually, as though it didn't matter, if I thought he was okay. I said I hadn't heard from him, which was technically true. She grew quieter after that. Not with guilt, with confusion, like a child watching her favorite toy stop working. Her affair hadn't just been romantic, it was aspirational. She liked the power, the proximity to influence. She believed herself untouchable by virtue of his title. But when that title vanished, so did the illusion. That's the thing about people who climb through shortcuts. They rarely build safety nets. She never confessed. Not once. But she started watching me differently, studying my movements, my silences, like she sensed the balance had shifted and couldn't understand why. She brought home wine, cooked dinner, suggested we reconnect. But I wasn't interested in repairing what she'd casually dismantled behind my back. So I waited one more week. Then I left her a letter, no drama, no accusations. Just a single printed copy of the email that started it all. Highlighted, annotated. Paper clipped to the resignation memo from Edward's office. She called me 12 times that night. I answered none of them, because I had already moved out into a downtown apartment with clean lines, fewer memories, and a view that reminded me of what self-respect looks like when it's no longer sharing a bed with betrayal. A month later, I walked into the new office. My name was etched into the glass, simple, elegant, understated. Vice President of System Strategy. A role that came with equity, international travel, and most importantly, the authority Edward had once wielded like a privilege. But unlike him, I hadn't earned it through manipulation. I earned it through patience, precision, proof. The executive team never asked for the full story. They didn't need to. I had positioned myself as the stabilizing hand during a volatile shift. And in corporate spaces, that kind of reliability speaks louder than gossip ever could. I didn't broadcast my promotion, but I didn't hide it either. The company posted the update on LinkedIn, a sleek photo of me in front of the skyline, a quote about strategic clarity and integrity under pressure. I didn't check who liked it. I didn't need to. I knew she saw it. I knew she read every line, probably from the house we once shared, sitting in a kitchen that suddenly felt unfamiliar. She sent a message, just one. Congrats. You deserve it. I didn't reply. Because I did deserve it. And she deserved to watch from the outside. There was no need to destroy her publicly. The truth did that already. Her social invitations dried up. The circle she thought admired her shrank. Whispers replaced greetings. The story didn't need my voice. It spread because it was real, undeniable, and carried by the very silence I had once filled with loyalty. Sometimes revenge isn't loud. It's measured, clean. It doesn't ruin someone with anger. It removes them with discipline. That's what I gave her. And Edward. And anyone who thought betrayal had no cost. Because I didn't just expose them. I replaced them. If you've ever been betrayed and chose power over pettiness, like, subscribe, and stay for more stories where silence rewrites everything.